Harold Hart epitomized the typical Wall Street success story. Each day, Harold watched the ticker tape as it moved money in and out of stocks over the years, and finally he had become a millionaire several times over. He had it all. And one evening, he had a friend or a businessman that came and wanted to talk to him about some business matters. And he just sat there, staring out into space, not saying a word. The man just waited on him until he finally said something. And then he spoke up and he said, "You know, nature has played a great hoax on man. You work all your life, you go through an endless numbers of struggles, play all the little games, and if you're lucky, you finally make it to the top. Well, I made it a long time ago, and you know what? It doesn't mean a thing. I tell you, nature had made a fool of man, and the biggest fool of all time is me. Here I sit, in poor health, exhausted from years of playing the game, well aware that time is running out, and I keep asking myself, now what, genius? What's your next brilliant move going to be? And all that time I spent worrying, maneuvering, it was all meaningless. Life is nothing but a big hoax. We think we're so important, but the truth is, we're nothing." That's what this man said. I read where one Jewish writer described life as a blister on top of a tumor and a boil on top of that. That's the way he described life. That's a pretty futile way of looking at life. The American poet Carl Sandburg compared life to an onion. You peel it off one layer at a time, and sometimes you weep. And that was kind of an interesting observation too. So I want to ask you this question this morning. Is life meaningless? That's the question. That's our sermon today. Is life meaningless? We turn to the book of Ecclesiastes. You're there this morning. Take your Bible, your iPad, your iPhone, whatever you use, and look there in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's an old book. It was written about 1,000 years before the time of Christ. But Ecclesiastes, as far as I know, is the only book of the Bible where God is totally silent. Because you see, it is a long monologue of one man. It's not a dialogue between a man and his God, as that is common in the rest of the Bible. The author is simply referred to as the preacher or the teacher, and we know that this preacher or teacher is none other than King Solomon. The Bible has a great deal to say about the life of King Solomon. However, I want to zero in on the fact today that Solomon was the wisest person to ever live on the face of this earth outside of the Lord Jesus Christ. You look at him, you study him, and you'll find that he was a master of innumerable subjects. You'll find that he wrote 300 proverbs, 105 songs, and 3 books of the Bible. His power was unparalleled as he reigned in Israel over 40 years during a season of peace and prosperity, and where leaders from all over the earth would come and they would visit his kingdom and they would inquire of him. And not only that, we find that he built that magnificent temple during his lifetime that David was not able to build. And although I don't see it as a thing of wisdom, his complicated family life included his 700 wives and 300 concubines. Now, I heard about one little child in junior church. They were talking on the subject of Solomon, and I guess his little mind is thinking, he said, I know why Solomon was so rich. All of his wives and concubines had jobs. And so, I guess they figured Solomon figured it out that way. I don't know. Some of y'all have kids, and you know they come up with these little things. But aside from the wives, we find that he was the wisest man that ever lived outside of Jesus. And perhaps he's going to be the one that can come along and answer this question for us that we ask, is life meaningless? So we look to Solomon here. We look throughout his book, And keep in mind as we look throughout his book that he uses one word over and over again, and that is the word vanity. In reality, vanity, it's meant in the sense of meaningless. And that's what we're talking about today. When you say vanity, it means meaningless, meaningless. So I'm going to have you to stand together today, and we're going to move through pretty quickly. So you're going to have to jump from page to page because we're not going to read consecutive scriptures, but we'll start in chapter 1, then we'll jump to a verse in chapter 2. Chapter 1, verse 14, or you can read it on the screen. We have each one on the screen this morning. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity or meaningless and vexation of spirit. Chapter 2, verse 17. Chapter 2, verse 17. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Chapter 3, verse 19. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Even one thing befalleth them, as the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above the beast, for all is vanity. Chapter 4 and verse 4. Again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This is all vanity or meaningless and vexation of spirit. Chapter 6, verse 7. And the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not filled. Chapter 11 and verse 8. If a man live many years and rejoice in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that cometh is vanity or meaningless. Thank you. You may be seated. Now, I don't know about you, but hearing all these things are pretty depressing. You know, all these verses that we've read that Solomon has said. All that reminds me of the guy who said, all I can do is lie in bed and hope that I'll fall asleep before I fall apart. You know, I don't know if you've ever felt that way or not. But let me explain exactly what Solomon is conveying to us today. Solomon is the story of a prodigal son. We find born into affluence to his father David. You remember, Solomon departed the way from God. He had walked with God in his early years, and yet he's walking away from God, and he indulged in his own pointless passions. I don't have time to get into the detail of all that this morning, although that I would tell you that God had warned him about all these wives and concubines that he had taken into his home, knowing that all these were of foreign lands and had foreign gods, and moved Solomon's mind away from the things of God to the things of this world and to false gods. But we find that the fact that he wrote Ecclesiastes indicates to us that he recognized the folly of his wayward ways. And as he is returning to the Lord, he writes an honest autobiography of the empty and shallow life that he discovered apart from God. So I would tell you, and this is the whole meaning of the message today, Solomon sought the best that life had to offer, and then realized that nothing rivals life simply lived in obedience to God. That's the conclusion that he comes to. Bored and burnt out, Solomon sums up his great life experiment with one word, and that word I've already told you about appears some 35, 40 times throughout the 12 chapters of Ecclesiastes, and that word is vanity, which means meaningless. That's his life. With all these things that he tries, that they are meaningless. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, he starts the book of Ecclesiastes out in chapter 1 and verse 1. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Then you'll find he ends in chapter 12 and verse 8. He says, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. So Solomon, from Solomon's wisdom, I think we can learn the answer to this question today that we've asked: is life meaningless? First of all, look at the futile dilemma. gifted with unparalleled wisdom as history's salutatorian second only to Jesus Christ, Solomon devoted his life to answer this question. Every brooding teenage punk band member, all the way to every midlife crisis parent, ask, what is the meaning of life? And many come to the conclusion that it is meaningless. They come to that point, the conclusion. That's where a lot of people are today. They have concluded that life is meaningless, much like the businessman that we told you about, that we read about at the beginning of our sermon today. Solomon tried several things in order to answer this question. Solomon pursued fulfillment through intellectualism. You'll find there in chapter 1, verse 17 through 18. And I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Now maybe what Solomon is saying here is that I have pursued the best education money can buy. I have explored all the academic disciplines. I have received multiple PhDs. As far as education, I've done it all. And then he goes on to say, it means nothing to me. You look at it there, he talks about it that way. He says it has left him feeling more empty than before. The more I studied, the more unanswered questions that I found. The more that I learned, the less happiness I experienced. Now, hear me today when I tell you that I'm absolutely not opposed to education. Now, I think we ought to get as much education as we can. But I have a problem with what I'm calling today intellectualism. Solomon said in verse 18, for in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. Education didn't give the satisfaction that he was looking for. Education is good in and of itself, but if you're looking to that in order to find fulfillment and contentment in life, Solomon tells us that you won't find it there. You think about that in the day and time we live in. To give you an illustration of that, consider of all the progress that we have made technologically and medically and scientifically and economically and militarily. You think about all these things and consider the total sum of knowledge, whereas in times past it would take 100 years for that knowledge to double, and now it is doubling in 2.5 months. They tell us that knowledge is doubling in every 2.5 months. And I ask the question today, has it made life more rich, more fulfilling, more satisfying? And we can all answer that question today with a resounding no. It has not. This world is worse today than it has ever been, as far as people being happy and content and joy. We turn on the news every week and we see the frustrations of people, the hate of people that comes out, and how sad that is. While we are flying higher and traveling further and going faster, I would tell you we're doing that more than any generation in history, but there has never been a generation of people that are any more unhappy than what we see today. People are unhappy. Solomon seems to say, take it from me, I had all the learning a man could ever hope for, but it produced me no satisfaction. That's what the wisest man said. But go on, look, Solomon pursued fulfillment through hedonism. Chapter 2 and verse 11 and 12. Then I looked on all the works that my hands were wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. And I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king, even that which hath been already done? Solomon decided if he was ever going to really be happy, he needed to deny himself nothing. I'm not going to deny myself anything. Immediate gratification was the way of his life. If he saw it and wanted it, he got it. That was Solomon. That's the way that he was. Hedonism is the philosophy that says, my pleasure is the highest good. That's what it says. And hedonism, I hate to say, is the philosophy that is governing modern America today. Hedonism. And that is, America says, if it feels good, do it. Or if you see it and you want it, you go for it. It's okay as long as it hurts no one. That's the philosophy, the mentality of Americans today. And a lot of people have never learned to come to the point in their life to say no to themselves. That needs to be taught, friend. We need that in America today. Somebody needs to stand up and tell us that there are things in our world we need to say no to. Hedonism is just the opposite of that. But I would tell you that our children, sad to say, have never learned how to say no. Because parents, we live in a world today that they say, go ahead and use drugs, just make sure you use a clean needle. We don't want that, but if you're going to do it, go ahead and make sure you use a clean needle. I hate to say it and to be abrupt, but it's very true. We have parents today that say, even I'm scared to say, even in our Christian home, that tell their teenagers to go ahead and have sex since you're going to have it anyway. You go ahead, but honey or son, if you're going to do it, make sure you have safe sex with a condom. That's what they tell them. That's what's being told in our world. Now, I would tell you in America, it's sad to say that our children are given everything that they crave and they ask for. And I often wonder the reason why that many people do not know how to say no to their children is because they have never learned how to say no to themselves. That's the reason why. And as a result of it, America, our children are dying and going to hell because parents don't know how to teach your children how to say no. This is why that we are in a drug-ridden, a sex-craving, a perversion-filled society that we are in today. Then third of all, Solomon pursued fulfillment through workaholism. Much of chapter 2, Solomon talks about the phenomenal work he has done. He goes on to tell you, which we don't have time to read through all that he has put in 60 to 80 work-hour weeks and that he's driving hard to build this kingdom for himself. And now he's out to prove his self-worth and to show the world that he is somebody, that he has acquired these lands and that he has invested here and that his investments have been good and that he has built these things. He's busy taking care of business and he's being very successful at it. But yet look what Solomon says in chapter 2 and verse 9. I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Now, if you were to look around at our society today, you would see so many well-meaning people who are sacrificing their marriages, they're sacrificing their families on the altar of career success and corporate ladder climbing. Do you honestly think that that is the wise direction to go? Do you think so? And I'm telling you something is desperately wrong in America today with our priorities and our values. There are too many young fathers who are gone all the time and young mothers who care more about the satisfaction of their careers than they do their children. That means more to them. And as a result of it, in America today, we are losing our children. We're losing them. And I ask you, what good is it to live in a fancy house and drive a new car and wear brand new clothes if we lose our children? And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong about having nice things. I'm just saying if it's at the price of losing our children, what is more important? What did the wise man who tried this have to say about people who invest their entire lives into their work? what did he say about it? Look with me in chapter 10, verse 17. Therefore, remember, he's the one that tried this. I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity or meaningless and vexation of spirit. And then the Bible goes on to say this about Solomon in verse 23 of that chapter. For all of his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. So let's move on to the fourth thing. Solomon pursued fulfillment through materialism. He looked in this vein. Chapter 4, verse 4, I consider it all travail and every right work, for this is, a man is envied of his neighbor. This is also meaningless, vanity, and vexation of spirit. Nothing is more futile and foolish than looking what other people have, becoming envious of them and trying to mimic them or trying to gain exactly what they have. As we have said in our society, trying to stay up with the Joneses, And there are a lot of people today that work in that vein to try to stay up with their neighbors, their friends, or whoever it had to be. You've heard that famous statement that said, I spent all my life buying things that I did not need with money I did not have to try to impress people that I did not like. You've heard that statement before. And I have a feeling that a lot of people here today in this service and our earlier service are far more materialistic than what we'd like to admit. And that is true. We're in America, and if we're not careful, we have a tendency to drift that way because our society moves our thinking in that direction. I like what someone said. Listen to this now. This is one of these you want to write down. This is a powerful one to hear. If material things are what you're talking about when you say I'm blessed, you have no idea what a blessing is. Because a lot of people today are looking for things to be blessed. I even hear people say to me, I am so blessed, and then they begin talking about all the things that they have accumulated. God help us to realize that the best things in life aren't things. Did you hear me? You think those 3 kids that don't have a mama today over there that are in church with their daddy without a mama today? You think they think things are important? Or they think back to the good days of their mama? Things aren't important. Now, what does materialism look like? Materialism is hoarding your money. It is being frozen by your fear of a rainy day. It is storing up treasures on earth rather than storing them in heaven. It is living by fear rather than living by faith. It is living by greed rather than living by generosity. Now, I believe, don't get me wrong, I believe that a person ought to save for the future and be wise, disciplined in this manner. But a person should not hoard. They should not do that. We ought to give according to what God's word tells us that we ought to give. Solomon learned that things and stuff do not make you happy either. Here's another thing that won't make you happy. He's discovered this in his life. He's tried it. It didn't do it. Listen to what he says in chapter 5 and verse 10. He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver. So if you love money, you're not going to be satisfied with the money. Nor he that loveth abundance with increase, this is also vanity. So if you accumulate all these things, they still are meaningless. They meant nothing to him. They will mean nothing to you. Solomon is relentlessly pursuing happiness, contentment, meaning, purpose, fulfillment in life, but nothing is working. Nothing he tries, and we could give you some other things too, but we don't have time in the sermon today that Solomon had tried. But he comes to the conclusion, none of these things work. They didn't make him happy. Yet he's the wisest man. You'll find that intellectualism will not give you fulfillment. Hedonism, workaholism, working so much, materialism won't bring you fulfillment. It didn't bring Solomon fulfillment. It won't bring you fulfillment either. You can try it, but it won't work. Which brings us to our second point, which is a very serious point. It is a far-reaching diagnosis. We find if a man or a woman is wise, they will diagnose or they will analyze who or what man is. And they're going to have to make a choice of which direction they're going to go, because they're totally opposite directions here. And the first one is what the world tells us, and that is man is the product of cosmic chance. You've got to make up your mind whether you believe that, because I will tell you, a lot of the world believes that today. A lot of the world believes that. That is exactly what we are being told today. And I would tell you that's exactly what our children in a lot of our schools, not all of our schools, but in a lot of our schools, they're being taught that today. And by the way, evolution is being taught in a lot of schools as fact, not theory. And how sad that is. And no wonder our world is in chaos and has no regard for life when they teach these things. Our education, our cultural systems have been teaching in many cases, not only in America, but around the world. In fact, it's been much in the rest part of the world, in Europe, and it has come to America in teaching that there is no God, there is no judgment, we're no different than animals. You'll see today that there is a high elevation of animals today, making humans and animals pretty much on the same level. And we're going to talk about that in just a few moments here. But they would say perhaps we are just a higher evolved order of biological species. They're saying that there is no absolute truth, that there are no moral absolutes. Morality is nothing more than just a situational, relative type situation. Every situation is different. You do what you want to do, and that's fine with you, and I'll do what I want to do, and that's fine with me. We all have our own situations, and that's the way that life is approached by many. You see, if man is the product of cosmic chance, then there really are no moral absolutes. Why would there be if we're just by cosmic chance? Every man should do whatever he feels good for himself, and that should be enough. If man really is just the product of cosmic chance, then he does not really have a soul or spirit. He's nothing more than merely a biological organism. He is a one-dimensional organism, physical only. He has no soul and spirit, if that is true. And therefore, you would assume that as long as his physical senses and his needs and his impulses are satisfied, that he would be happy, if that's true. And I'm going to give you the example of that today, of a being that is one-dimensional. You take a dog. A dog is happy as long as you feed him, give him water, and give him shelter. And pat him on the back or whatever. He's wagging his tail. Is that not true? He's a one-dimensional creature. That's what makes him happy. You think about the bird is happy with a few worms in a nest, and the bird is happy. The point is, animals are one-dimensional, and they're content to have their physical and their impulses met. Now, I know some of you love your dog so much that they are like one of your family members. Is that not true? Come on, admit it. You know that it's true. You love your animal that much. But do you ever think that dog sits around, you look at them over there, and they're looking over there. You ever look at that dog and you're wondering what they're thinking? You know, have you ever done that? You look over there, I promise you that they are not pondering the meaning of life or wondering what is really going to take place in the future that's going to give them a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. I promise you they are not doing that. They're looking at you thinking, is he going to ask me to come over and pet him? I hope so. You know, and then he gets up and comes over there and wagging his tail because he's fully happy and content because you just fed him and you're rubbing his back. and he's happy as can be. He's not thinking about, well, what am I going to do for retirement? You know? Are my owners going to be around longer than me? I promise you that they're not doing that. Solomon explored and he experimented with, and these things, perhaps they should have satisfied him, but they did not satisfy him. They did not do that. Solomon was struggling with these questions that a lot of people struggle with today, and that is these questions. Did man merely evolve? He's struggling with this question, same way men do today. Or the second question is man specially designed by the creation of God? Those are the two questions. You'll find him go on and talk about it in chapter 3 and verse 18. I said in my heart concerning the state of the sons of men that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Even one thing befalleth them. As the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is vanity. All go into one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? So Solomon here, he isn't sure if man is any different than the animals. He's questioning about all this. He doesn't know if man will live beyond this, beyond death or not. He's not sure about this. And if man is nothing more than just a cosmic chance, then he should live just for today. He might as well do that. He might as well take what he wants. And I submit to you that if a person's going to live thinking that we are nothing more than a cosmic chance, he might as well live for the day and what he wants. Because that's just the way that it is. There's nothing after life. Nothing after this, after we die, after this life, if you believe in cosmic chance. But let's move on. I want to look, second of all, there is another choice. The second choice is man is the product of divine creation. And if this is true, this has far-reaching consequences. You'll find in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7, it says, the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Now, my friend, what we discover here, something that is very unique about man that sets him apart from every other living creature. And that is, he has the breath of God in him. That's what man has. He has the breath of God in him. And so I'm telling you that man is not one-dimensional as what the animals of this earth might be. In fact, he is a three-dimensional being. You'll find man has a physical dimension and that he can relate to his environment. Man has an emotional dimension which allows him to relate to himself and relate to others. And it is of the soul of man, his mind, his will, his emotions, that it gives himself self-awareness and self-consciousness. But we find also man has a spiritual dimension. And this is how he can relate to his creator, Jehovah God. That's how he can relate. Since man has all three, a body, a soul, and a spirit, he is never truly content until, hear me, Christian, this is the key here. He is never content until all three dimensions of his being are fully acknowledged and fully satisfied. That's the only way. The man who minds only the physical dimension will be empty, will be hollow, will be unsatisfied. God created us with this wonderful, unique capacity. Thank the Lord that we can know him, and that we can love him, and that we can relate to him, and that we can enjoy fellowship with him, and that we can listen to him, and that we can be filled with his very life in us. That's what we're created. We're beings that are created that way. And no man is ever going to be complete and content who tries to live the one-dimensional life. They never will be. No person will ever be fully satisfied until they experience a life-giving relationship with God through his dear Son, who is the Lord Jesus Christ. They never will. God created us with 3 dimensions, and if we try to be independent from God, then we will be spiritually dead. That's where we'll be. We'll be spiritually dead. And that is exactly how the Bible describes a man or woman that is outside of Jesus Christ, that has rejected Jesus Christ. They are spiritually dead. They're dead, and they don't even know it. The Bible tells us in Ephesians 2:1, you who he hath quickened, who were dead in trespasses and sin. That's where we were before we came to know Christ. We were dead in trespasses and sin. And this is why Solomon was so frustrated and empty, because even though he literally had it all, he's trying to live life as a one-dimensional life. He is trying to live life independent from God, and the result was he's spiritually dead, he's empty, and there is no meaning in his life. He has no meaning, even though he's tried all these things. Now, friend, let's end this sermon on a good note, and thank God it is a good note, a fulfilling discovery. Fortunately, Solomon's story doesn't end in frustration and futility. Solomon finally comes full circle, and eventually he returns to the God of his youth. And I want you to look this verse up. I want you to turn there, because I don't think we don't have it on the screen. I want you to see it. It's in chapter 12, and this is the key. Wonderful verse here, wonderful verse to underline. Let us hear in verse 13, chapter 12, verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So here's exactly the discovery that Solomon finally made. Number 1, life lived in independence from God is totally futile and meaningless. That's the discovery. Remember how Solomon opened the book there in Ecclesiastes when he started, and he's saying, changing the word from vanity, he's saying meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. That's what Solomon said. And our world is full of people who have no idea about the meaning, the purpose of their life. They have no idea. And they're living their lives independent from God. And there's no greater way to waste a life than living a life in vain and never knowing true fulfillment. Friend, you can go on and try to find your fulfillment where you want to try to find it. But if you think you can beat out the wisest man that ever lived, Solomon, yeah, you're mistaken, my friend, because you're going to come to the same conclusion that Solomon did. And you're going to end up your life and say, life was meaningless because I tried all these things. Second thing we find in conclusion, Solomon found out, life lived in relationship and submission to God is fulfilling and meaningful. That's what Solomon found out. Solomon starts his search by saying, I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all his vanity are meaningless. And if his hungry soul couldn't find any meaning under the sun, I'm talking about on this earth, in this world, that's what he's talking about, under the sun. You're not going to find it in this world. You're not under the sun. You're not going to find anything worthwhile that's meaningful in this world under the sun of this world, of this earth. You won't find it, my friend. It is not there. Let me tell you something today in conclusion. Only Jesus can fill the hollowness and the emptiness of a meaningless life. He's the only one can. Jesus said, the thief cometh not but for to steal. Satan has come, and all these things of life that Solomon thought he would try, Satan moved him in that direction to try all these things. He's come to steal and to kill and to destroy. Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. In other words, I've come to give you meaning in life. I've come to give you purpose. I've come to give you something really worth living for. And I want to invite you today to come to Jesus because Jesus is the only one that can give that to you. However, when I invite you, understand that I am not asking you to take on some oppressive religious system that will choke the fun and laughter out of your life. That's not what a relationship with Jesus Christ is all about. And I would dare tell you that that's what religion will do to you, even Christian religion. There are a lot of people today that claim to be Christian, but they're really not Christian. They're religious. They're religious action. They have a religion. They don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And so I'll tell you, these things will choke the life out of you. Oh no, I'm inviting you to come into the fullness of life. I'm inviting you to enter in a full and meaningful life through a personal relationship with God who created you for himself. And you can have that by receiving none other than the person of Jesus Christ. Let us hear the whole conclusion of the matter. Solomon says, fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Bottom line today, friend, you must be born again. You got to be born again. You got to receive Jesus Christ. That's what you've got to do. That's the bottom line. The way to be born again is confess that Jesus Christ is who he claimed to be. He is the Savior of the world. Repent of your sins. Receive Jesus into your heart by extending to him a personal invitation. Jesus, I believe in you. Forgive me my sins. Come into my heart. I receive you unto myself and surrender your life to be totally unto him. That you might be a testimony for Jesus Christ. And if you do this, the Bible gives us the promise, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. That's the promise of the Bible. What will we be saved from? We'll be saved from a futile life, from an empty life, from a meaningless life, from an empty, godless eternity, eternal hell, separation from God. That's what we'll be saved from. Thank God I'm saved from that. Thank God I've been born again. Praise the Lord. The answer to empty and meaningless life is Jesus Christ.